Over 225 years ago, 55 very wise men that we know as the Framers gave us an amazing document. This document is still relevant today and was made for all future Americans. We are 55 of those future Americans.
Those founding fathers studied all forms of government from history.
They analyzed and learned from other governments' successes and failures.
They were looking to create a new form of government.
One where people could enjoy more rights and more freedoms.
And they wanted to make sure that these freedoms would last.
They did not have these rights under their king.
They wanted to give future generations of Americans the freedoms and rights that they treasured.
The freedoms that they gave us are such a part of our everyday lives now that we don't even comprehend that Americans haven't always had these freedoms.
We live in a way different world now, but the Constitution still works.
And it worked great because of the checks and balances that were built into it. Looking back in history, the Founding Fathers, they did that on purpose because of the king at the time, who had all the power and was abusing their people because of it. So, because of that, the Founding Fathers, they created checks and balances so that way no one branch of government would have too much power.
And we see that when a branch of government does gain too much power, that is an amount of power that it wasn't originally designed to have. That's when we start really running into trouble. And the reason we run into trouble is because it puts our system out of balance. Like when a president goes around Congress and uses executive orders. If our leaders would just follow the Constitution the way that it was meant to be followed, our country would be a lot better for it.
Who would want to let soldiers live in their homes with their children and even be forced to provide them with the necessities, things such as candles, salt, vinegar, bedding, and even build their fires? In Massachusetts, the king tried this, but the colonists refused. The Founding Fathers didn't want this to ever happen again, so we have the Third Amendment.
I just can't imagine living my life, cooking dinner, taking care of my kids, and having somebody barge in my house, waving a piece of paper saying it's a writ of assistance, and having them come in and be able to go through my pantry and dig through my stuff to make sure that I didn't have something that the king didn't approve of from a different country. I'm grateful that we had the Founding Fathers give us the Fourth Amendment to protect us from that.
Criminal trials are more fair today because of the Constitution.
Because of the Sixth Amendment, a person has the right to see and hear the person accusing them of a crime.
And then he has the right to have them questioned in court.
It used to be in English courts that a witness could write their testimony on a piece of paper
and then have it read by someone else during the trial.
How could a jury or judge even be sure the right person wrote it or that it was the truth?
The Framers wanted to make sure that punishment wasn't so cruel for convicted criminals. That's why they included the Eighth Amendment.
When the Constitution was adopted, punishments from the king included cutting off hands and ears, slitting the nose, and branding cheeks.
The penalty for treason was being hanged, disemboweled, and beheaded.
They knew and understood how serious it would have been if they had lost.
But they were driven by the hope of forming a free nation, so they were brave.
The First Amendment is relevant to all Americans, both now and from the past.
When the colonies were still young, 7 colonies had official religions. The founders knew that each individual should have the right to choose which way to worship God.
Because of the Constitution, we are free to go to the church of our choice.
3 other things that we enjoy about the First Amendment are freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right and freedom to protest peacefully.
Not all citizens in other countries have these rights.
The Second Amendment preserves an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in the militia, and to use that arm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. The framers acknowledged the right to bear arms as necessary to the security of a free state. Alexander Hamilton called the right of self-defense paramount to all positive forms of government.
The right to bear arms and freedom of the press were the two freedoms most cherished by the colonists.
The colonists had to depend on having a French Navy for defense, and so when they wrote up the Constitution, they included a Navy in their Constitution for future wars.
We can choose to keep our president in office by having an election every 4 years because of the Constitution.
It's fun to play princesses, but the Founding Fathers knew that we did not need a king.
Some of us have learned and have been reminded of how the Constitution is relevant today. We must live it, love it, learn it, and remember it.
We need to realize with these rights come obligations.
But they are easy things to do compared to what it took to get those freedoms.
We need to be a responsible people.
We should be willing to help others by looking out for our family, friends, and neighbors.
The more we do for our own families and communities, the less we have to depend on the government.
It's important that we all stay informed and involved.
Once a famous French historian came over to the new United States and was very impressed that all the children knew their rights.
Whether we're young or old or in between, we cannot allow it to be changed by twisted interpretations.
We should try hard to be a good example of a great citizen.
We must be a good people. We're always watching and learning from you, so be a good example.
The men working on the Constitution knew that they were being directed by God.
They also knew that a strong country needs God to stay strong.
America needs God today.
Of course, the Constitution of the United States is relevant today. In its original form, it was written to adapt itself to meet the needs of changing times. In fact, our federal administration is still being restricted by this system put in place by our founding fathers. So we need to continue to hold our leaders accountable to the oath they pledged to support, to defend, protect, and preserve the Constitution. It's been battered, but it's still working. It's not stale or dead. It is a vital, living blueprint for the success of our nation and us individual citizens. And because of it, America has been blessed.